because we come from communities where the truth doesn't always reach the headlines, but it lives in what we face every day. This is Changing Trends and Times, bringing clarity and context to the issues shaping our lives right now. No spin, no distractions, just real talk rooted in real impact. Now, are you ready to lean in and bring your voices into the conversation? Then, allow me to introduce to you a man committed to asking the questions that matter and breaking it down so we all understand. Your host, Charles King.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special episode of Changing Trends and Times. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you read a piece of news and thought to yourself, is this actually true? Not because you're paranoid, not because you distrust everything, but because somewhere along the way, this country made it nearly impossible to know who to believe. That feeling, that creeping, exhausting uncertainty, that is the crises. And today, we're going to call it exactly what it is. America is in an information crisis, not a media crisis, not a fake news problem, an information crisis, meaning the very infrastructure that a democracy needs to function, the free flow of accurate, accessible, and equitable information is collapsing. Local newspapers are closing at a rate of 2 per week. Social media algorithms are designed not to inform you, but to engage you, because rage keeps you scrolling, and scrolling keeps the ad revenue flowing. A handful of billionaires now own the outlets that were once supposed to hold billionaires accountable. And in the middle of all of this, as always, stand our communities. Black communities, brown communities, working class communities, the ones who need accurate information the most and are not being given the least. This is not an accident. I want to be clear about that. The information the information desert that exists is too many of our neighborhoods, where there is no local reporter covering City Hall, no newspaper holding the school board accountable, no trusted voice explaining what that new policy means for your family. That desert was not created by bad luck. It was created by decisions, business decisions, policy decisions, decisions made by people who understood that an informed community is a community that can organize, resist, and demand better. And they chose profit over people, access over accountability, and consolidation over community. But here is what they did not count on. They did not count on us building our own platforms. They did not count on the rise of independent Black media outlets and shows and creators who looked at the information desert and said, we will be in the water. That is what this show is. That is what this moment is. And today, we're going to go deeper than we ever have, because the crisis is deeper than it has ever been. AI is now generating content that looks, sounds, and reads like real news. Deepfakes are putting words in real people's mouths. Health information costs lives during COVID, and is still costing lives today. The stakes could not be higher. Today on Changing Trends and Times, we're going to map how we got here. Examine what is at stake right now in real time. Sit down with an expert who has been on the front lines of this fight, and because we are not a show that just identifies problems, we're going to give you real, tangible tools to protect yourself, your family, and your community. Because knowledge is still power, information is still freedom, and this show has always been and will always be a platform for truth. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about, CRT, that is critical race theory. And, it has meaning of many, many things to an enormous amount of people. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to dive deeper into this, because what I'd like for you guys to get from this is the idea and the knowledge that what has transpired is no mistake, but how we have to be smarter when we're talking about what happens in our households, what happens in our communities, what happens in our school systems, what happens when we meet people in general. We're going to talk about how CRT is really more than what people have put out via the news streams, that is through mainstream media, that it's all about education. It's a whole lot more than that. So let's talk about this landscape and how we got here. So let me just first tell you about the purpose. Okay, the purpose of this establishes the historical and structural context for America's information crises, giving the audience and the foundation they need to understand the forces at work before the conversation goes deeper. It moves from macro to the national collapse of news infrastructure down to the ground level and what it means for Black and underserved communities specifically, and why the erosion of information access has always been a feature, not a bug, of systems designed to maintain power. And so as we talk about this, I want to first just tell you guys, when I say it's a feature and not a bug, but it's a system that's designed to maintain power, what that means is when they start spewing this rhetoric of critical race theory and CRT, it was basically aimed at Black and brown communities, stating that this was not some kind of misfortune that discriminated against others that were not this is the discrimination for Black and brown communities that discriminated against white communities, is what this was put out as to be. So when I tell you about the collapse of the local news across America, okay, you guys know that there's so many major media news outlets. Of course, there's ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, MSNBC, Fox News, you got CNN. And so you have these major media outlets. Now, the print newspapers are slowly, but not slowly, but surely, but they're dissipating. And so now pretty much everything's going digital. And so in going into this digital age, what that does is it gives more control to these people that are owning these outlets. And I just want to give you this example. When Jeff Bezos bought and purchased the Washington Post, when he purchased the Washington Post, he did that, and what most people thought originally was supposed to be a good thing, that, now people will be able to get freer, more informed news. No, that's not the case at all, because there are things that has been disallowed to come out through that media. We all know that Rupert Murdoch and his family owns Fox News. And we all know that they also own the Washington Times. And so what we know is that this is skewed stories, data, information that's coming out that does not give proven facts as to how people are receiving this news. So what that means is that if they're conservatives and they believe in conservative principles, you can best believe that everything that's going to go into that newspaper is going to be about conservative principles. And so when we talk about this, I just want you guys to understand that this data that you're getting, and I hope that you guys are not thinking that social media is really going to be a news outlet for you. You got to think again about that, because when things are coming across social media, and some of these social media platforms, you want to be very, very careful as to how you receive that. More than 2,500 local newspapers have closed in the United States since 2005. I want you to let that sink in for a second. 2,500 local newspapers have closed. That's not by accident. 2 outlets close every single week. News deserts. Communities with little to no local coverage now affect tens of millions of Americans. Tens of millions of Americans. So if you're out in, a major rural area of a major metropolitan city, then that means that you're 9 times out of 10, this is going to be that information that you're receiving. In the process of receiving that information, you guys need to be very, very careful as to how you're actually accepting this, because you're going to need to make sure, it doesn't matter what stream of media that you're listening to. When you get that data, you get that data. Take that information, but go and check that information. Because I can guarantee you that the majority of these electronic media outlets, or a majority of these outlets that are posting these stories to social media, I can guarantee you that data is skewed. It's skewed, and it's missing an enormous amount of information that's not only going to make you more informed, but it's also going to make you that much better of a person to know that you know where to go and check for what you need to be checking, but you also need to make sure that when it comes to making decisions that are going to affect you and your family and your community, you're able to make those informed decisions. See, all of this is a part of critical race theory, and not this thing that they've been skewing and throwing on major news outlets and talking about something that's dealing with Black and brown communities, and how the learning process for Black and brown communities are skewed in particular ways, and now they want to stop all of this, and it's not necessary anymore, and they just come up with all kind of craziness that they're telling people, and it's just not where that is. The people who are left most uninformed are always those in lower income and predominantly Black communities. Let that sink in. Let that sink in for a second. So I want you guys to understand that, again, as they talk about critical race theory, and they want to throw it into one box, they want to put you guys in this one box. It's more than that, because it's an information system. That's what critical race theory mainly is. This is why they don't want Black and brown communities being informed, is because, we have outlets where we've got folk in the Black and brown communities that are creating their own sources of media and giving the direct information to its people. Again, despite that, make sure that you check the information. Because when you check the information, it's amazing at what you'll find. It's amazing. So, we talk about social media, and we talk about the rise of algorithmic content bubbles and echo chambers. There's an enormous amount of that that's happening on social media. And again, this is not by chance. It is intentional to create misinformation. It's the misinformation that's getting out to you, the public, that people aren't actually vetting that news, but they're taking it at face value and they are spreading this. And it's false. And it's false. We have got to do better. We have got to be better. Because if we're doing this and we're letting these echo chambers not just get into the algorithms that we use, but get into our minds. Because once it gets into our minds and we verbalize this out loud in places where there is somebody that's misinformed, as you might be, we'll take that information and run with it and call it that at face value when it's not true. This is what we've got to work on. This is what we've got to make better. So social media platforms do not curate content based on what is true or what is important. They curate based on what generates engagement. Outrage, fear, and division generate more engagement than nuance or accuracy. So again, that's believing the lie over the truth. And so for every lie that's out there, and if there's don't care how many people it is that want to try to catch up to that lie, you'll never catch up to them because they keep generating. They keep generating. And they're generating and constantly giving you this skewed data, and you're taking this information when you shouldn't. So again, even if you take it in and you listen or you read, whatever it may be, I'm just asking that before you actually make that real, make that a source to be real and to be competent, just make sure you verify it. Because again, these are the parts, again, I'm telling you about critical race theory that they're not talking about. But this is where they're doing the most harm. And they're doing the most harms to all underserved and marginalized communities, in particular, the Black community. So social media could be good in one way, but it could be bad in another. This means the algorithm actively rewards misinformation and punishes measured, balanced reporting. So that means if you're telling the truth, social media is not going to play what's true. It's only going to give you that lie because you're engaging with the lie. So you got people that engage in these fights that they're doing on the internet. You got people that are engaged in promoting sexual activities. I mean, people do what they do. So I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying. And I'm not one that's judging and criticizing. What I'm saying to you is these are the things that they'd rather give you than give you the truth. They'd rather give you these things than give you the truth. Like those reality shows, you know, with all of that foolishness that's there with these made up storylines. They publish that all over social media. That's all over the place. That's top line. That's not real. Those are all created storylines that get views, get clicks, and get them paid. We've got to stop this, and we've got to stop engaging in that kind of material because that material is ruining our communities. The result is millions of Americans are living inside information bubbles, believing wildly different versions of reality, and those bubbles are getting harder and harder to escape. That's about as about as truthful as you can get with that. And that means is that the more you engage in this, the more it pops across social media, the bigger it gets, the larger it gets. If you actually scroll down one of your pages on your social media, I don't know what people follow on social media, but I'm just going to say that once you scroll down your page, I guarantee you, you're going to find so many things that, one, you're going to look at and say, well, why is this here? Because, one, I either don't look at this or this does not interest me. And how that works, and based on these algorithms, is that the people that are attached to you, that are attached to this kind of mess, is why these things come into your social media. Now it's up to you to engage, but people that I know, and I don't know, I can't go through all of this, but I've got to get a social media person, because I can tell you, and sometimes on my timeline, a lot of that foolishness pop up, and I don't know the first thing as to where it comes from. I'm not engaged in any of those things, but they pop up on my social media. And they pop up is because the whole intent is to misinform and to distract you and keep you away from the truth, but put you in harm's way of mess. This is not something that we want to have happen, and this is not one of those things that I hope, I hope people can understand where this is coming from and why critical race theory is actually that much more important. So let's talk about media consolidation and who owns the narrative. Now, this is where I think you guys really need to get a clear-cut understanding as to why this is so important. In 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 different companies. Today, that same 90% is controlled by just 6 corporations. When 6 boardrooms decide what 330 million people see, hear, and read, the free press becomes a managed press. Let that sink in. All of these things that you're getting across your social media, that's not by chance. That's intentional. This is what the intention is. And that intention is to keep you misinformed and to keep you at bay and distracted with stories that are so unnecessary. I'm sure that there's each and every individual, especially for those of you that are listening today, that you can know one thing that's true. When it comes down to you being a part of whatever you want to be a part of, and you wanting to be informed the best way you need to be informed, you would not want to have any of these guidelines that are going to be restrictive to you in any way. You're not going to want that. You don't want that. Because what you want is for the realness of how things are going to be with you, that you want people to not just know when you're talking and having conversations about many things. It matters not what it is. It could be politics. It could be education. It matters not. When you're having that informed decision, based on where you found your information and what's real and what's false, you're able to disseminate that, and you're able to have that intellectual conversation that's got an enormous amount of emotional intelligence and your critical thinking as to how things should be. But it's when you don't pay attention and you're continuously distracted is where you're continuously missing out. I don't want you guys to miss out. I want you to be able to be informed, but I also want you to be able to engage. Engaging means more than anything that you could ever imagine. So again, as we're going through this, critical race theory is more than just about education. It's all about being informed. So independent and community-rooted journalism, the kind that actually serves our neighborhoods, has been squeezed out, sold off, or shut down. The consolidation is not just an economic story, it is a power story. And let me tell you what gives it that power story. Remember, as I told you earlier here in this particular part of what we're discussing now, 6 major corporations own 90% of the media. 6 corporations. Now, if 6 corporations own 90% of media outlets, do you honestly think you're getting real news from these news outlets that were set here to be freedom of press? I'm gonna answer that, and I'm sorry, but I have to ask and answer that question. That answer is you're absolutely not getting the news that you deserve. They're absolutely not giving you what's real and what's true. Because as long as they can throw out those little highlights, those reels of glitz and glamour, and they catch your eye and you go down that rabbit hole, how long is it going to take you to come out that rabbit hole? I'm just telling you that it matters not which news outlet you watch, where you're getting the news from that you read. I'm asking you to please check that news and be that much more informed as to what they're talking about. That's what I want you to do. And we can engage and we can talk about this for 1,000,001 years. I am open to talking about this, because when they talk about critical race theory the way they do, and they provide this information that's misleading, and people start going down that wrong rabbit hole, they're never going to come out. And the reason why they're never going to come out is because the stories are going to get that much more intriguing, that much more false, and that much more misleading, which means you're spending your valuable time in the wrong place. And again, that's why we exist. And even with this news that I'm giving you, please check it. And I guarantee you, what I'm telling you is the truth. But you need to check this as well. I'm not beyond reproach. I want to be that source where I want you guys to know that I am definitely Mr. Reliable. Let's talk about the digital divide and information access in Black communities. Broadband access remains deeply unequal. Millions of Black households, particularly in the South and in rural areas, still lack reliable high-speed internet. We're in the 21st century. AI is very popular, and people do not have proper internet. Really. People do not have proper internet. Now, we're going to weigh that on the scale. Have internet, don't have internet. See how different that is? That is not cool. What that does is there's a stall down here for the folk that don't have reliable internet. There's a stall, a real serious stall. What that stall is lack of information. So by the time you get that connection, the story would have changed maybe 5, 6, 7 times. The lie has gotten up to the 7th degree. And we know that that's not a good thing. So without connectivity, there's no access to digital news alternatives. But even where access exists, the gap continues. Black voices remain dramatically underrepresented in newsrooms, leadership, editorial boards, and ownership, which leads to why we created our ecosystem that consists of our flagship American Black and White, this news outlet here, Changing Trends and Times, and CK Stories from the Heart, where people get to come and talk about their stories. That is the very, very reason, because voices need to be amplified where people are getting the truth. If you guys want that truth, then I'm suggesting that you please not just follow America in black and white just because, but I want you to get the real understanding behind this. This is about raising awareness and amplifying voices in black and brown communities that are underserved, marginalized, that therefore would never get the opportunity for people to see and know who these people are with the work that they're doing in their communities. But we're the people that mainstream does not talk about, that they want to keep silence until people start falling away from that and listening to the real news. We welcome you because we're telling you what you need to know. We're going to keep you informed. And see, I just hate to hear and see how this is affecting communities that should not be affected, because we're now in the 21st century. But why this is happening is all about money. It's all about money. The result is coverage that routinely misrepresents, stereotypes, or ignores black communities entirely. Yeah. That's the sad truth. That is the sad truth, but that is what happens. That is what has happened. And that is why when we talk about why people are doing the things that they're doing, they should not be doing them. So what I want you guys to know is that this report is another report that I will be posting on the website. And it will be under the headline Critical Race Theory, or CRT. You guys need to get this report and this publication. It may seem like a lot, but when you read this, I promise you, this is something that you guys need to take to heart, and you also need to critically think the effects and how this is going to make your life that much better, that much easier. So let's give you the historical context and the information control as a tool of power. This is not new. During Reconstruction, the black press, newspapers like the Chicago Defender and the Crises, were surveillance targets because they told the truth about lynching, voting rights, and black achievement teachings. And black achievement. Teaching enslaved people to read was a crime because literacy was recognized as liberation. The suppression of black information networks did not end with Jim Crow. It evolved. It evolved. This asks that question: why did such a thing evolve? It evolved because what they wanted the people to get was lies. They did not want people getting the truth. So they figured as long as you're black and you can't read, that's a good thing. If you're black and you can read, you're a problem. I'm saying to each and every last one of you, make sure that you read, but also make sure that you're getting a credible source of news. The suppression of black information networks did not end with Jim Crow. It evolved. Understanding today's crises requires understanding that the weaponization of misinformation access against black communities has a very long history. A very long history. Ain't that something? A very long history. But what's being done now to combat that? Or so many platforms now are popping up where they're doing the news, but they're doing the news. People are doing the news in a way in which we want to make sure that it's educational, because we want to make sure that you're learning what it is that we're trying to say. and what it is that we're trying to get out to you, because it's really that much more important. Let's talk about the role of independent Black media in filling the gap. In the absence of equitable mainstream coverage, Black-owned media has always stepped up. From the Black press of the 1800s to today's podcasters, YouTubers, newsletter writers, and community journalists, independent Black media has carried the weight of truth-telling for our communities. That tradition is more than vital and more under threat than ever before. Now, if this is not a call to action to support these Black platforms, these Black information tanks that are giving you the news that you deserve, then you're not listening. You're only hearing. Because if you're listening, then that means that there are places to get the news in which you see most, that's going to be most clear for you, excuse me. And so that means that it's got to be that much better. So when we talk about attention, let's talk about the attention economy and its true cost. Our attention has been monetized. Every second we spend on a platform, our behavior is tracked, packaged, and sold. The more polarized, anxious, and confused we are, the more profitable we become. The information crisis is at its root also an economic crisis, and until we understand who profits from our confusion, we cannot fully understand why the crises persist. So that's basically telling you guys that every time you go on social media and you do a click on any of these wild and crazy stories, you're paying somebody. You view these stories, you're paying somebody. Excuse me. So what we have to do is we have to find our ways of actually locating these people again that are doing the best to help our communities stay informed and be as best as they possibly can. Because now is not the time to run off in the wrong direction and think about somebody's going to do something that's going to help you to become or help your community just instantaneously overnight become this whole new place. Now that's absolutely positive. That's possible. But in the process of that being possible, what do you think you're actually going to get from that? That's the thing. That's the whole thing. Because when you go and you're telling positive stories that's got positive influences with positive connectivity, 9 times out of 10, a lot of people pretty much don't get excited about that. It's strange, but it's true. They don't get excited about that. They get excited about who's fighting, who is going to run through the fire, or who's stealing from this person, things of that nature. That's not real news. That's not even real life, because those things should be punishable for those behaviors. Instead, they're being rewarded on social media, where they're trying to make a mockery either of those people or a particular group of people. So as they're doing that, don't do not let yourself get caught up in that kind of echo chamber. That echo chamber is not one for you or anyone. That's bad news from the get-go. And don't be so intrigued that when you see the story that you got to click on it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about critical race theory as to this point. And what I also just intended to do is I just wanted to give you guys, just some information to keep you going as we talk about critical race theory, because critical race theory means everything. So I'm going to say this, any time that if you guys got any questions or concerns, because I don't want to go over time, you got any questions or concerns, please reach out and send me an email at changingtrendsandtimes@gmail.com. Send me an email. When you send me that email, I mean, hey, just make sure you put in the subject line what we're going to talk about or what's your question, because I want to make sure that I'm helping you guys stay informed about as much as you possibly can. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my closing monologue, because there's so much more to go. And I do not want to take up too much more of your time. I had to push time back because I had engagements that popped up, and I want to apologize to you guys for that. So we have covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about how America's information infrastructure was built, how it has been weaponized, and how it is crumbling in ways that leave our communities the most exposed. We have sat in the weight of what is at stake: our votes, our health, our economic security, and our ability to see ourselves clearly and truthfully in the world. And we have done what we always do on this show. We have moved from the problem toward the power, because that is the only direction worth moving in. I want to say something to you directly, to everyone watching, streaming, or listening to this conversation. You're not confused because you're not smart enough. You're not misinformed because you're not paying attention. You're not navigating a system that was deliberately designed to be difficult, that profits from your uncertainty, and that has never been fully honest with you. The information crisis is not your personal failure. It is a structural failure. The structural failures require structural responses, but they also require individual resistance, and the fact that you are here engaging with this conversation, asking hard questions, and refusing to be satisfied with easy answers, that is resistance. That is power. Independent Black media exists because our communities have always understood something that the powerful would prefer we forget. Whoever controls the story controls the future. For generations, that control was taken from us by force, by law, by economics, and by exclusion. We built our own presses anyway. We published our own papers anyway. We told our own stories anyway. What Changing Trends and Times does, what every Black-owned outlet and creator and journalist is doing right now, is a continuation of that long, unbroken tradition of refusing to be erased. We will not be erased. We will not be lied to in silence, and we will stop building platforms where the truth, we will not stop building platforms where the truth can live. Tonight, we talked about the crises. Next time, we keep building the answer. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, stay connected, and remember, in a world full of noise, the most revolutionary act is knowing what's true. I'm your host, Charles King. This has been Changing Trends and Times, and we will see you next time. You guys, please tune in next week as we continue our series on healthcare in underserved communities and marginalized communities. We will have episode 3 of that series, and we will have the final episode of that series, episode 4, on August 8th. So till then, you guys have a great evening, have a great weekend. Please subscribe, enable all notifications, and send messages wherever it's necessary. But please get engaged. We look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to you being a part of what this program is about, what our ecosystem is about, because we are thinking about you, the community. You guys have a great evening, and we will see you next time on Changing Trends.